Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Navy League's annual Sea Air Space Conference and Trade Show in National Harbor, Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C. And we have with us Rodney Nathan, who is the owner and manager of American Machines, one of the companies. We were talking just a little while ago, and we normally are interviewing all the company, guys from the very, very big companies. But you're a guy who's actually providing the machines that allow the American shipbuilding industry and the government shipbuilding industrial base to exist. Talk to us a little bit about some of your products, and how you guys are supporting this critically important national security industry.
We've put machines in the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Bremerton, Washington, Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine, ship repair facility in Japan, the Camp Pendleton. So we support a lot of the military. One of the things that's critical these days is there are a lot of defense jobs, both in industry and in the government, where the jobs are there, the skills are not. So we specialize in providing machinery that helps with that skill level gap. A lot of this metal arts work has traditionally had an apprenticeship program over the years where somebody was training for years to do this type of work, 10, 15, 20 years to where they got proficient. So our equipment that we are trying to put in the yards, and what they need, whether it's a civilian yard or a government yard, is something that takes care of the skill element. So we can have a machine that we can put in, and within 3 or 4 days we can have an operator cutting with 20 years of experience without having gotten the experience, and that's really what is needed. So that's where we've been able to make our mark in this business with CNC cutting, profile cutting, oxy-fuel cutting machines. We're cutting anything from light gauge material, 29 thousandths of an inch, up to 12 inches thick.
That's amazing. And some of your machines are more than 100 feet long, right? I mean, you have 2 of them that you deliver to Bremerton. Talk to us a little bit about, sort of the range of the equipment that you guys are providing, from the small side to the very, very, very large side.
We do everything from customized small die sets to punch out pipe hangers to strap the pipes and tubes on the ship for just $3,000 or $5,000, up to the last one was a $2.5 million cutting system for the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Bremerton, which is was about 130 feet long. Had 2 double gantries complete with automatic oxy-fuel systems, straight pipes, triple torches for beveling plates so that the plate can be butt welded without having to do post-processing. In other words, before they would cut materials and they would have to sit there and manually grind it. This is all done automatically. So this is in support of the nuclear submarine and surface ship repair at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. In the past, we've put a couple of shaft lathes in for the Nimitz-class carriers. Those foundations are also in excess of 130, 140 feet, and the work pieces on those would support 80 tons. So an 80-ton shaft from an icebreaker or from a carrier. So they were, again, highly advanced machines where the machine can do a lot of the interpolation work.
This cutter that you delivered to Puget Sound has the ability to not only cut stainless steel, aluminum, but also heavy gauge steel, right? All on one machine.
Correct. So it can process those materials, and a lot of times you don't want to mix your stainless and carbon. In their case, they have 3 tables, each of which are 36 feet long, and they'll process up to 34-foot plate, carbon steel on each end and stainless in the middle. And these machines are on big gantries. They can run extremely fast, and they're so accurate these days that years ago when you'd cut plate like that, say a half-inch material, if you set it up on its edge, it would fall over. We can set it on its edge, and it's sitting there straight just as if it was cut with a laser. So it's quite advanced these days, and the whole idea is to eliminate as much post-processing as possible.
And obviously, because every bit of touch labor on it is actually cost that's added to the product. Let me talk to you about your partnership that you have with Australia. That's where we met. We talked to Christopher Pine, the Australia's defense industries minister, and what's the relationship that you guys have forged with Australia, and how is that a mutually beneficial relationship from your standpoint?
Yeah, he would be same as for Americans, our Secretary of Defense. So It's been wonderful. One of the nice things about it is, I don't know, many people don't realize, but the U.S. and Australia have been allies since the very beginning, probably for the last more than 100 years. They've been in every conflict the United States has been involved in. What's really nice for us is that this machine was developed and built in Australia. We use American power sources. In other words, we use a Lincoln Electric or a Hypertherm plasma power source made in the U.S., but their technology, one thing they do is they're technology driven. So we're using technology to overcome shortcomings of other items. Plus this was a custom tailored machine, and we do custom tailored machines for different shipyards. So they're currently making a machine for us that has, not only does it have a cutting table, but it's got a pipe turning. The plasma can do large pipe up to 60-inch diameter and cut out sections of it for quick processing, as well as splitting I-beam. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and they're innovative.
And you mentioned, we were talking a little bit about how you had, that you've always supported shipyards, but you had a large commercial business. After the recession, you shifted more toward the government market. Do you see yourself coming back into the commercial marketplace at some point?
Prior to 2008, we were probably about 80% federal government. 80% commercial industry, and about 15% federal government, and the other 5 state and local. We did a lot in schools to try to bring back the trades programs. After the downturn and sequestration and funds going away, the lowest hanging fruit was the shipyards. And being an ex-naval officer myself, I'm quite familiar with how those work. And so we got involved at that time, and I realized there was such a need for that expertise to how to bring equipment that employees can use that don't have the training, because it was unfortunate, but when the Vietnam era guys retired and the folks that were just after Vietnam retired, the journeyman programs were all cut. So we've got people in the shipyards now that have almost no training. And of course the Navy's scrambling. We find a lot of community colleges. All of a sudden, years ago, back in the early 2000s, everybody abandoned their trades programs because you could make more money selling or in business or doing futures trading. I'm not sure what it was. But we're finding it's coming back in vogue. And the problem now is we don't have the job skills to support these industries. And a lot of these companies, in my neck of the woods, you'll find Intel and a lot of other companies are actually paying for students to go to college in training skills that they need because the workers aren't there.
Well, and that's right, and all the major shipbuilders have their own apprenticeship programs.
Correct.
Whether or not it's Newport News down there has a tremendous program. Electric Boat has one, and it's working both with the states of Rhode Island and Connecticut. Talk to us a little bit about your expansion plans. So what's going to be next? What are the kind of business you guys are going to be going after?
Well, there's some interesting upcoming projects at the shipyards in terms of some very heavy materials. The CVN 75, the Ford class carriers. Right now, they're gearing up to equip those shipyards with the equipment they need to do their overhauls and maintenance. They're saying, well, why? It's brand new. But people don't understand it takes, that process for the bidding and process and everything that it takes is a 4 or 5 years down the road before that equipment's sitting there, and some of those are going to need work before that.
And let me ask you one last question. There was a lot of fiscal uncertainty. There was this sense there was going to be a lot of money coming down. President Trump talked about it. It was one of his campaign promises. But right now it's in a tenuous position about whether or not that money that everybody hopes will come by rescinding the Budget Control Act and all that stuff is actually going to happen. What sort of an impact does that have on you as a supplier of the tools that the companies use to build their products? What kind of impact does that kind of fiscal uncertainty have on you?
Tremendous impact. We had at the beginning of this year, I believe it was, or the end of the last fiscal year, we had machines in the shipyard that couldn't run because they couldn't buy a $10 consumable item. It was very tenuous the way they were trying to find money just to make that work. Me personally, we currently have a project which is for doing the seismic upgrade to one of the largest machine shop the Navy has, which is in the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. It's maybe 3 football fields long and a football field wide, built in 1933. And Puget Sound is in the seismic 3 earthquake zone in the Ring of Fire. So we've put a whole bunch of new machines in there over the years, plus the old ones they already have. And the problem is the building may come down. So we were involved in a project to retrofit that shipyard. Our portion of the job is to test our machines, move them out of the way so the prime contractor can excavate around the columns and pin these columns so this big building doesn't come down the next earthquake. The problem we have is the continuing resolution is not paying the steps we need to pay. They're into the prime contractor for probably $6, $7, $8 million. We're trying now on a $108 million project, and it should have been a $215 million project in actuality. We're only into it for about $9 million, but we're not getting paid on a lot of work we've done. So we've done work 9 months ago that has not been paid for yet.
Sir, thanks very, very much for your time.
We appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.